ABC7 presents Under the Living Roof, inside the California Academy of Sciences.
10 years to plan, 3 years to build. More than $480 million has come to this, the brand new California Academy of Sciences building in Golden Gate Park. Hello, I'm Dan Ashley, and for the next hour, you'll get an inside, behind-the-scenes tour of everything this remarkable new museum has to offer. Take a look at it from the air. Even the roof is unusual. It's like a 2.5-acre piece of Golden Gate Park floating 3 floors above ground level. The entire roof is covered in plant life. Not just beautiful, but practical as well. More on that a little later. Underneath this living roof is a 155-year-old institution that's been totally reborn. A state-of-the-art mix of nature and technology. It really is an incredible transformation of a Bay Area treasure. It opens to the public tomorrow, but you get to see it now. This is the new California Academy of Sciences, redefining what it means to be a museum.
There's so much action here.
I like looking at the fishes, the dinosaur bones.
Downstairs when you get to walk under in the water, like right above you.
What we're trying to do really is celebrate life. It's all about how we as a species got here, what's around us, and how we're all going to stay into the future.
The Academy is a unique combination of the Steinhardt Aquarium, the Morrison Planetarium, the Kimball Natural History Museum, and a scientific research institution all in one.
We've waited a long time for it, and it's worth it.
Some of the old favorites are back. You can still play with the penguin. There's a swamp like the one in the old Academy with snapping turtles and a stunning new star. And there's the same focus on protecting the planet, but this time the building itself is part of the message.
The largest public green building in the United States of America.
We went up to the roof and saw the 7 hills. It's fabulous.
Collect as many different species as you can with your wrist.
Oh, I got them! The Academy is breaking new ground with a 90-foot diameter dome with a rainforest inside. One of the largest coral reef exhibits anywhere in the world. And an aquarium program that combines science facts with a science fiction look.
We're the same Academy in a very different sort of wrapping, if you will. There is just so much being offered here at the new Academy of Sciences, and you'll see all of it in much greater detail as the hour progresses. But first, how did we get to this point? Times were certainly very different when this institution took shape in the Wild West. The first Academy president was shot dead during a card game. His killer hung by vigilantes. Things got better from there. The California Gold Rush set the stage for the founding of the Academy of Sciences.
There were a lot of entrepreneurs, privateers, scientists, teachers, physicians that came out, and there was a gathering of a number of them that decided that the West was so unique. Every plant and animal that they saw here was new to them.
In 1853, they began weekly meetings. Members wrote descriptions of new species of plants and animals that were published in the newspaper. Eventually, they built a museum on Market Street and started collecting specimens. One of the prized possessions was a reconstructed mastodon.
The real tusks of that mastodon were on display, and they were enormous. Of course, the mastodon burnt to the ground in 1906 after the earthquake.
In fact, the entire museum was destroyed by the earthquake and fire, but the mastodon tusks survived and have been on display ever since. It took about 10 years for the Academy to open a new museum in Golden Gate Park. A few years later, Steinhardt Aquarium was added with its famous alligator swamp. As years went by, more and more new wings were tacked on.
There were 9 separate building campaigns, all by different architects, and there was really no organization. It was sort of the Winchester Mystery House of museums.
John McCosker was director of Steinhardt Aquarium for 22 years, and he's been a scientist at the Academy for 35. For years, he was on the forefront of the campaign to repair or replace the aging museum because of earthquake danger and other problems. Here he is in 1993.
This is the oldest still operating aquarium in America. 1923 they built this, and you can see the old rebar from 1923 and all of that saturated seawater just into the concrete, and the rebar's disappearing.
Eventually, the Board of Trustees decided to replace the entire complex. City bond measures provided $123 million. About $30 million is from the state and federal government. The rest of the $488 million cost is being privately raised. Visitors got a last chance to say goodbye to the old exhibits. And in 2004, the animals and exhibits were moved out. One by one, the buildings torn down. For John McCosker, it was a bittersweet moment.
It'll be so very different. It'll look nothing like this. I hope it's as wonderful and even more exciting. But I'm sad because this is my life.
That was a tough moment, but today, because of this fabulous new building, John is thrilled, and so is everyone else connected with the Academy, and it's easy to see why. The first stop on your tour today, a tropical rainforest growing right here in not-so-tropical San Francisco.
This four-story dome is the largest display of its kind anywhere in the world, filled with live plants and animals, a feast for your senses. Our guide is Chief of Public Programs and Steinhardt Aquarium Director, Chris Andrews.
Rainforests are just magical, magical places. It's almost as if nature has thrown a party and they've invited everybody and everybody's come.
A spiraling ramp takes visitors through the top 3 floors of this exhibit, traveling through the rainforests of Borneo, Madagascar, and Costa Rica.
The sights, the sounds, the smells in a rainforest are completely overwhelming when you visit them. And what we hope here is when people come into our exhibit, they'll get just a hint of what a rainforest is really like, and they'll care about them in the future.
Almost everything about this exhibit is on the cutting edge of museum science. The glass that encloses the rainforest was installed about 1.5 years ago. The glass panels were imported from Germany, made with the lowest possible lead content. The glass helps keep the humidity high and the temperature at a constant 82 degrees. The roof is sprinkled with skylights that bring in sunshine for the plants. The first trees for the rainforest arrived last December. Just getting them in the building was a huge challenge. We sped up the action so you could see what's involved in setting up a greenhouse this big. The entire process took 2 days. The trees were grown in Florida and trucked across the country. The tallest is 25 feet. The Academy wanted a diverse mix of sizes and types of trees, just as you would find in nature.
Every step has been a challenge in one way or another. You have to have a lot of passion for it because nobody's ever done this before. So there's a lot of trial, a lot of error. We just keep plugging.
Finally, the coverings were removed from the trees and misters turned on to simulate the high humidity in a real rainforest.
And you want the trees not to look too pretty and pruned. You want them to look sort of gnarly and wild.
4 months later, planting crews put in the lower level of the forest, designed to simulate muddy banks along a river in the Amazon. Some of the trees have already grown as much as a foot.
Which is a good sign that they're feeling comfortable. 2 of them have set fruit. Yeah, they're happy.
While the plants soaked up the sun, the Academy gathered the animals that will live inside. Chris Andrews showed us some of his favorites. This new addition is a bat-eating snake.
This particular form sometimes occurs in caves, and as bats come out at night to feed, this snake will live in the mouth of the cave and will grab bats out of the midair.
The Academy is trying to get as many creatures as possible that were bred in captivity rather than taking them from the wild. This is a red-eyed tree frog.
Like so many rainforest species these days, they're suffering from habitat destruction and so on. This animal is called a Malaysian horned frog. You can see it has this wonderful horns on its eyes, on the front of its face. Simply a form of camouflage. People just love to get up close to animals. And one feature of the new Academy is we don't want all of our animals to be in cages behind glass. We want to bring them out on the floor, get people close to them.
This boa constrictor is being trained to be comfortable around people.
This snake is a really cute, quite lovable animal, I would say. Not everybody shares my enthusiasm, but if you look at their face, they've got these cute, cuddly little cheeks.
About a month ago, the birds for the rainforest exhibit were brought into the dome. They spent their first few days in cages while they adjusted to the temperature and the feel of their new home.
They seem to be doing really well. As soon as they came in, they became very vocal. I think they really like the environment in here.
Once the birds were released, they adjusted quickly. A few days later, bats from Borneo were brought in. They're living in a cave in the rainforest.
There we go.
Once you get to the top of the rainforest, you'll take this glass elevator back down through the dome. You'll end up in this acrylic tunnel underneath the rainforest, looking up at giant fish from an Amazonian river. You know, it took years to accumulate and to move all of the creatures that will absolutely dazzle you here, 38,000 in all. This green sea turtle is part of an ambitious experiment to replicate life in a sandy pool around a Philippine coral reef.
We're really pushing the envelope on exhibits in many, many different levels, in scope and scale and content.
Bart Shepard is curator of the Steinhardt Aquarium. He says even though the animals in this exhibit live together in nature, putting them together in captivity is a big challenge. The first obstacle, just getting all of them to San Francisco.
Finding the animal at the right time, at the right size, in the right location, it can be, quite a little trick.
We were there a year ago when this truck full of bamboo sharks arrived from Southern California after a long trek up Interstate 5. No big deal if you're a person, but kind of an ordeal if you're a shark.
It's very exciting. Oh, yeah.
10 sharks are traveling in this giant box.
It's a tight quarters for them, but when you put them in there and you put the lid on and it's dark, they really settle down and they stay nice and quiet.
During the trip, water conditions have to be perfect.
This is our meter that we're using that monitors our pH and our dissolved oxygen and our temperature. They're doing great, and in fact, one actually laid an egg on the trip. So we have 11 now instead of 10.
The egg case is carefully removed from the tank in a plastic bag. But getting out the sharks themselves is trickier. They've got bodies built for escape.
It's essentially a tube of muscle, and it's wet and it's slippery, and you try and get a hold of it, and it can really get away from you.
Each shark is carefully checked by a veterinarian. They get weighed and measured, and a blood sample is taken. The team has to work quickly because the sharks can't be out of the water for more than 5 minutes. They were born in a Long Beach aquarium and will eventually grow to about 3 feet long. The 70-pound sea turtle arrived the same night. He was driven up from San Diego, where he's on loan from SeaWorld. The turtle travels light, just a wet towel to keep him comfortable. Like all the new animals, he was chosen for specific reasons.
One, they're very charismatic. Two, there are a lot of conservation stories and messages that can be told about them, how they're in trouble around the world.
But it's always a gamble. The animals you choose may not behave the way that you expect them to. All the new creatures were held at the Academy's temporary building on Howard Street in downtown San Francisco.
We added a lot of tanks. This whole exhibit here is all holding tanks, essentially, for the collection building efforts of the new Academy.
The building was set up as an interim museum for 4 years, while the old Academy was torn down and the new one was built. Thousands of animals have come through here.
That is a major challenge, and in knowing where they are, how many we have, what stage of quarantine they're in. It's quite chaotic at this point.
And when it's time to move out, it can be just as challenging as moving in.
They're going to catch one.
These stingrays from Taiwan have been living for several months at Howard Street. Now, it's moving day again. They're herded into plastic bags.
It avoids the trauma associated with netting them, and the fish can't really see the plastic bag, so you can usually trick them and they swim right in there.
Ray coming. One by one, they are hurried to a veterinary station. And just like when they arrived, the rays are weighed and measured again to evaluate their progress in the last few months.
The animals were a lot stronger than they were when we first brought them in, which is a good sign. They've been growing, they've been here and stabilizing and getting plenty to eat.
Then there's the delicate matter of taking a blood sample. It has to be done right by the ray's tail.
There's a little bit of danger involved, yeah. They have a long tail that usually has a spine or 2 spines on it that can inflict a painful sting. They can kind of whip you with that and sting you.
After each ray gets a thorough once-over, it's loaded into a tank on top of a truck and driven across town to the new building where a team is ready at the loading dock. The rays do get a little impatient as they make the trek out of the truck tanks and into a giant tub. They're rolled into an elevator.
You guys will be happy.
And this is the moment one ray picks to try to make his escape. Luckily, everything is happening so fast he can't quite make the jump. Minutes later, he's heading through the building, then gently lowered into his home. A biologist is in the tank with him to make sure that everything goes smoothly. At first, there's some head bumping while the rays figure out their new surroundings, but pretty soon, they've got the hang of it.
It's a new world for them. It's probably more like their old world.
Moving the sea turtle to the new building went a lot faster. Biologists lured him to the side of his quarantine tank to get his back scratched, which he loves.
Here we go.
Then they slipped the turtle into a sling to get a hold of him as they hauled him out.
Hold on.
A half hour later, he was at the new building getting acquainted with his tank mates. But as the days went by, the relationship between the turtle and the stingrays did not go so well. Sea turtles are vegetarians, but this fellow got a little too interested in the fish food that the rays were eating.
And then one day we actually witnessed him actively chasing and biting at one of the stingrays, so we knew it. The experiment was over.
So now the turtle, who didn't play too well with others, is heading back to SeaWorld where he was born. Luckily, all the other animals in the lagoon are thriving.
Whenever you're working with living animals, there's always the potential for things to not go as you expected. They have behaviors, they have their own mindset of what they want to do and how they want to do it.
Bart Shepard tells us that kind of experience is actually one of the most exciting things about working in an aquarium. You never know what's going to happen next. All right, when we come back, a closer look at the living roof and the coral reef exhibit here at the Academy of Sciences, the deepest anywhere in the world. And a little later on, the dramatic arrival of the albino alligator. Back after this.
You're watching Under the Living Roof.
Welcome back to the brand new California Academy of Sciences and our inside look under the living roof. I'm Dan Ashley. We chose the title for this special program for a very good reason. As you can plainly see, this roof is quite literally alive. I'm standing on an integral part of this new building, and you can too when you visit. From the start, the new California Academy of Sciences building has been a giant science experiment covered with a living roof, a huge expanse of dirt with real plants growing almost as nature intended. The original idea came from groundbreaking architect Renzo Piano.
He spent some time walking around Golden Gate Park, getting a sense for the setting here, looking out at the surrounding topography of San Francisco. And he came back downstairs after spending about an hour up on the roof of the old building. And he had this very iconic now line drawing. It was a green felt tip pen sketch of a rolling roof line.
That sketch launched plans for what may be the most complicated living roof ever built. Curved steel beams were installed to create a rolling hillside effect, like the hills of San Francisco.
We had to come up, using specific types of models, ways to be able to look at the steel and then throw it through bending machines that get it just the right proportions.
The building has two giant domes, each 90 feet in diameter. This is the skeleton inside the new high-tech planetarium dome. And this is the start of the rainforest dome. The contractor hired a roller coaster company to create the curving ramp inside. The roof is made of 7 different layers, providing everything from insulation to drainage. It's designed to absorb 98% of the rainwater that hits it.
And that's important because normally when rainwater hits a roof, it acts as a conduit, carrying pollutants from that roof and from the street out into the ocean or out into the bay. This way we're capturing the rainwater and the plants are using it, and you're reducing that runoff.
Each section was tested to make sure it's waterproof. And while all that was going on, more than 100 miles away, the plants for the living roof were starting life in Carmel Valley. There are 9 types of plants, all native to Golden Gate Park, each variety chosen to provide habitat for birds and insects.
The roof may last up to 400 years. These are long-lived plants. Resistance and resilience, that's what we're building into the structure and building into the natural landscape.
The plants were grown in biodegradable trays made of coconut husks. In May of 2007, crews finally began placing the trays on the roof. They'll be watered for a few months. Then the plants are supposed to be self-sustaining and enjoyed for generations.
Hopefully our kids can say, oh, my daddy did that. He was up there working on the top of that roof.
Now that the roof is finished, insects have already discovered the flowers, and the plants are growing in as expected. Beyond beauty, there's another benefit.
All that soil, there's 6 inches of soil up on the roof, makes it a great insulator, so we'll use a lot less energy on heating and cooling the building beneath it.
Incredibly, throughout the project, construction was always right on schedule. This is how it looked 2 years ago in September. This is how it looked just 2 months later, then 6 months later. And
This is how that same spot looks now. What a transformation. All right, from up on the roof to underwater. This is the California Coast exhibit, which represents a kelp forest off the Farallon Islands. Great white shark territory without any of the danger. On the other side of the building, another giant tank holds a coral reef. We've been watching that take shape. This is the first piece of coral, moving into what will soon be one of the largest living coral reef exhibits anywhere in the world. It's an exciting moment for a team that's been planning this for years.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's going to be really hard to get me to get out of this today.
The exhibit is designed to simulate a coral reef in the Philippines, one of the world's most diverse habitats. The tank is 25 feet deep, holding 212,000 gallons of water. It's really well thought out. Visitors can look right down on the coral from above, then go downstairs and get a different view through one of 5 windows into the tank. It's very impressive now, but just 2 years ago, all of this was pretty hard to imagine. In 2006, construction on the coral reef tank was just beginning. The shell for the tank was built at the same time the rest of the building was going up around it. Across town, the Academy put in a coral farm to grow inhabitants for this new exhibit. The staff wanted to grow their own coral so they wouldn't have to take it out of the wild.
Growing coral in such an environment is a little tricky.
They collected small pieces of coral from other museums. Then they had to figure out the perfect conditions to make the coral feel as if it were in the tropics.
We were doing everything that we could to feed the corals, give them the right lighting, give them the right water circulation, control problem algae, do all that kind of stuff so that we could maximize the time that we had, the limited time that we had to grow more than 1,000 square foot coral reef.
While the coral grew, so did its future home. This is what the tank looked like last year. Crews made artificial rocks by piling cinder blocks to mimic the shape of natural habitat. The blocks were wrapped with plastic mesh, then sprayed with concrete. Workers created a realistic texture on the rockwork by using casts from actual coral reef walls. They hung energy-efficient halide lamps that will simulate tropical light. The giant viewing windows were installed. Finally, they piped in ocean water, and the tank was ready. Now the next big step, moving the coral from the farm to its new home. The move will take months, but we were there for the first moving day. Biologist Seth Walters is in charge of getting the corals safely out of their tanks.
So just kind of wave the water over the top of the polyps. The polyps are the nice tentacles, green tentacles that you see out and about. And basically I try to wave over the top of them so they pull in a little bit. That will help them protect themselves when they're exposed a little bit to the air.
The corals are gently packed in plastic bags and styrofoam boxes, then driven to their new home in Golden Gate Park. The team has to work fast so the coral won't be out of the water too long. The divers get right to work. They're just learning the intricacies of this new tank.
It's very complicated and three-dimensional and has lots of little nooks and crannies and holes, and we'll kind of wedge those corals down so that they're in a secure spot.
This was just the beginning of a long process, trying a variety of species in different parts of the tank to see what would work where. Now, 7 months after those first pieces of coral were put into place, a dramatic new reef is growing.
See, what's that fish that's kind of pinkish?
Academy scientists say global warming and other environmental problems may destroy up to 70% of the Earth's coral reefs in the next 15 years. They hope this exhibit will show visitors why the reefs are worth saving. Experts will tell you that the overall health of the oceans can be measured in many respects by the health of the coral reefs. Hey, look who's back from the old Academy, the blue whale skeleton and the T-Rex, a couple of familiar faces. When Under the Living Roof continues, we'll go black tie. The penguins are back, better than ever, after this.
You're watching Under the Living Roof.
Welcome back. I'm Dan Ashley. The California Academy of Sciences building here in Golden Gate Park is brand new, but many of the old favorites you may remember are back. For example, this giant pendulum. It's fascinating. It looks like the pendulum is rotating, but actually it's the building rotating along with the planet. Another old favorite you can still enjoy? The penguins.
Let's go.
It's lunchtime. Aquatic biologist Pam Schaller will be your server today. This is an all-you-can-eat affair, but sometimes the diners get a little pushy. This meal was served just a short time after the penguins moved into their new home.
Right away, they took to this exhibit.
The setup is very different from the penguins' old accommodations at the original Steinhardt Aquarium, but they've always been one of the Academy's biggest crowd pleasers.
They were really cute, even though you shouldn't have a pet. Seeing them jump in the water.
When the old Academy at Golden Gate Park was torn down, the penguins moved to the museum's temporary home, south of Market Street. There were 8 penguins in the colony. Soon, there were 9.
Hi, come on.
Meet Howard, 29 days old and a little bit nervous. Until this day, Howard was living with his parents in the penguin exhibit in a nest out of public view. Now he's old enough to walk, but he can't swim yet, so if he stays in the exhibit near the pool, he may drown. That's why Howard will spend the next 6 weeks behind the scenes, being raised by his adopted mother, Pam.
What's really important is that we're contributing to the gene diversity of penguins.
Howard is an African penguin, a species that lives off the coast of South Africa and Namibia. The number of African penguins in the wild is dropping dramatically.
We really wanted to focus on these birds in particular because their numbers in the wild are declining. And in the early 1900s, you're looking at about 1.4 million birds, and now we're looking at about 180,000.
In the wild, penguins are competing with large-scale fishing operations. But at the Academy, there's plenty of food available, of course. On his first day with his human handler, Howard's most important job was to learn how to eat fish fillets. Luckily, he's a quick study.
He's beginning to understand that these whole pieces of fish are what he should be feeding on.
While Howard bulked up, the Academy also started looking for new penguins from other institutions. 5 came from a zoo in Idaho. When they arrived, they ranged from 5 months to about a year old. They were almost adult size, but didn't have their full tuxedo coloring yet. The penguins flew in the cargo section of a jet, and they arrived in very good shape.
Especially since they've been on a plane for an hour and they've had to been in transport for about a total of 4 hours. You know what it's like flying, you know, you get a little tired, and they look really refreshed, actually.
In June, the first 2 penguins were finally taken to give the new exhibit a test run. This time they traveled in kennels. When they arrived, it took a little coaxing. And finally, the big moment, the first penguin plunge into the new pool. A few days later, the whole colony arrived. The tape on the glass helped the penguins learn it's a solid surface so they wouldn't try to swim into it. So far, so good.
They're exhibiting very natural behaviors in here, and I attribute that to a very naturalistic exhibit.
The new penguin tank is 25,000 gallons, 5 times bigger than the original. There are 20 penguins living here now, and they can swim right up to the visitors. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell who's watching who. And remember Howard? He's 1.5 years old now.
Howard has a girlfriend. Yes.
That's Howard in front with his first girlfriend, Safara. Penguins mate for life, but they usually shop around first.
There's always drama, social drama going on in here. It's so funny.
Again, these are African penguins, so their new home is right here in the middle of African Hall. This portion of the museum is another example of a long-time favorite of visitors brought back better than ever. The California Academy of Sciences first opened African Hall in 1934. The museum used what were then state-of-the-art techniques to create a trip to Africa in the middle of San Francisco.
A team of scientists as well as community members went to Africa, collected specimens, and maybe more importantly was they documented one spot in Africa that captured some of the ecology, biology, and uniqueness of that place.
They actually documented more than 20 of those unique spots. Then they created life-sized, 3-dimensional scenes and put them together to create African Hall.
That hall meant a lot to the city of San Francisco and to generations of children and families.
When the Academy tore down its old building and began building a new one, much of African Hall was carefully preserved.
We documented everything, we took everything apart piece by piece and inventoried it and recorded it, and then now we're keeping as much of the original as possible and putting it back together again.
The hall itself was rebuilt with molding and ceiling tiles to match the originals, but this time crews used materials that were earthquake safe and fire retardant. The original animals were refurbished at a taxidermy workshop in Santa Rosa. This zebra is being cleaned with ground corn cobs.
We put these various solvents in it, and they break down the dirt.
Even after more than 70 years, most of the animals are in pretty good condition. Their insides are made of steel rods covered with paper.
They glue it together kind of like paper mache, if you will, layers upon layers. And it's very hard. If you go and bang on one of these forms, it's a pretty hard material.
The scenery was recreated at the Academy Studios in Novato. The original murals were painted on both canvas and plaster. Key pieces were cut out and saved to help recreate the exact colors. New murals were painted to look as much like the originals as possible, all done in the Impressionist style.
They would see their reference and just go right at it and not worry about, does this look exactly the way it's supposed to look? It's if you get the feeling of it, then you're doing it right.
It took about a year to finish the murals. Then they were glued to the walls in the brand new African Hall.
Pretty much like really heavy-duty wallpaper.
The murals are about 10 feet high, but the walls are 20 feet, so the artist paints the tops of the walls to blend in. It's almost impossible to see where the canvas ends and the walls begin.
It's right along here.
Next, the animals were brought back and anchored to the exhibit. Then, the plants.
They were and are still very, very fragile. If you look at them, they have a translucence to them because they're wax, and it's not a material that we work with anymore. So we tried to salvage and repair as much as we could.
Back at the Novato workshop, new plants were made to replace those that just couldn't be saved. And now, as the new African Hall opens, visitors will be treated to some new exhibits and a few surprises. But the goal remains the same as it was in 1934. Make visitors feel immersed in Africa.
So that Africa doesn't seem like a distant place where if bad things happen, it's okay. We want them to feel part of nature and to protect it and to be a steward for Africa as well as the rest of the world.
Part of protecting the environment is understanding it. And to that end, the Academy is much more than just a museum. Behind the scenes, science is at the core of the mission.
Oh my gosh, we got Aristocroa. Oh baby!
These scientists just discovered a new species of beetle in the mountains of China. Academy researchers travel all over the world and bring back what they find to San Francisco. So in addition to all of the cool creatures you see on exhibit, there are a lot more behind the scenes. 2.5 million other fishes in this academy that the public never sees.
Of course not. Scientists see them. Scientists come and visit. We send them in the mail.
The collection is sort of a dictionary of biology, with records of species collected more than 100 years ago.
Here's the entry for the Galapagos expedition, where they were collecting between June 28, 1905 to November 29, 1906.
The collection ranges from extinct butterflies to stunning birds.
These are birds of paradise from New Guinea.
The racks and drawers fill an entire side of the new building. Every one of these 20 million specimens was moved out of the old academy to a temporary storage area, then into the new building.
Didn't drop a jar and didn't lose a fish.
Senior scientist John McCosker showed us around the collection. His favorite specimens are from the deep sea.
Like this remora. I mean, what a strange looking creature. It looks like a roadkill, but in fact, what it is an adaptation for attaching to whales and sharks and turtles.
Some clever inventor actually used the fish as a model for the sole of a shoe.
Every day is thrilling if you're a biologist.
Another of John's favorites is this anglerfish.
Well, in the deep sea, it's all dark except for the little light on the end of his fishing lure, which is bioluminescent. So it has a little light bulb at the end of its fishing lure, and it's wiggling like that so that something comes up to investigate, and then it just grabs it and swallows it.
That deep-sea angler is a close relation of this living frogfish on display in the aquarium. And that's the beauty of having all these specimens here together.
What is this species? What's it related to? What is its role in the ecosystem? Why did it go extinct? Things like that can be learned from this library of science that we maintain here.
Research, a critical part of what's happening here at the Academy that the public rarely gets to see. What the public does get to see is always impressive and sometimes a bit nostalgic. I'm standing in front of these columns, which are exact replicas of the columns from the original Steinhardt Aquarium. Speaking of impressive, When we come back, the dramatic arrival of the alligators when Under the Living Roof continues. Welcome back to the California Academy of Sciences and our special program, Under the Living Roof. The lion may be king of the jungle, but here, that title goes to an alligator named Claude. He's very different from any gator you've probably ever seen, and getting him here was no picnic.
Alligators are no muss, no fuss travelers. There are 2 8-footers in this truck, packed in crates for the 4-day drive from Florida to San Francisco. All they need is a fan to keep them cool.
They could go months without anything to eat.
Gator hauler Rick Cleveland keeps track of the animals by peeking into the crates. During the trip, he sleeps in the truck.
It's like a baby. I don't leave it. No matter what it is, I don't leave it.
Now the challenge is to get the alligators out of their crates and into their new home. Academy staff members can't wait to see the show. First, the gators are taken out for a medical exam. But this rare albino alligator isn't exactly eager.
So do you want to jump on him?
Yep.
It's a very nerve-wracking process, obtaining the animal, packing it up, shipping it, and then getting it, unpacking it, checking its medical condition, and then releasing it into the exhibit.
In addition to the albino male, there is a standard color female arriving today. The gators travel with their mouths taped closed. After they're examined, they're put back in their crates to be moved to their exhibit area. But first, the handler has to take the tape off.
Let go, Brian. Go. Yep. Drop it.
A few minutes later, the crate is lowered into the swamp tank. Handler Rick Cleveland has been doing this kind of work for 20 years, but you can't be too careful.
It can be quite tense and so on, but today's procedure, we rehearsed it 2 or 3 times before today with boxes and bags of sand and so on.
Finally, the gators are in the water, getting used to their new home. The Academy expects them to be a prime attraction, just like the alligators in the original Steinhardt Aquarium. The old swamp tank was one of the museum's most popular exhibits. When it was taken apart, the bronze seahorse railing was saved, along with the hand-painted tiles put in 1923. But the new tank has some improvements. There's an underwater viewing window, and now the rock island in the center has radiant heating.
When gators feed, they tend to eat large meals, and then they like to find somewhere warm to go and sleep.
Both alligators in the exhibit are American alligators bred in captivity. The white coloring is a natural mutation, but in the wild, albino babies rarely survive.
And what happens in nature is those animals are usually quickly removed by predators because it's like a flashing neon sign, eat me.
These 2 alligators were born in 1995. Here at the Academy, they're expected to live many decades. And as for Rick, the gator hauler, so long, farewell, and how about a goodbye kiss?
No. But I appreciate it.
Whether you're watching the alligators or taking a nice walk through the rainforest, the Academy of Sciences is all about the natural world, studying it and protecting it. So when the Academy had the chance to start fresh with a brand new building, it only made sense to make it as green as possible. Earlier we told you about the Living Roof's eco-friendly construction, but there is a whole lot more in here to help the planet.
The first step in the Academy's green building plan was to recycle the old museum as it was torn apart. 90% of it was reused.
We have concrete from our old building that's now in road systems over in Richmond, and sand from the site here that's now restoring beach dunes along the coast.
Then, in the new museum, the Academy tried to use products that are as easy on the environment as possible. The steel and concrete are made of recycled materials, and the walls are stuffed with denim. It turns out the same stuff that makes a great pair of pants also makes great insulation.
The scraps of denim that come from the cutting room floor of blue jean factories have found a new home here in our walls.
There's no formaldehyde in denim insulation, and the installers told us it is heavier than fiberglass, but more pleasant to work with.
It feels better than a normal fiberglass insulation. It doesn't itch as bad.
The Academy is also trying hard to save water.
The purple pipes that you see here are all pipes for reclaimed water. We use reclaimed water to flush the toilets, to backwash aquarium filters. So we're reducing our use of potable water by 90% here in the building.
The salt water to fill the aquarium tanks is piped directly to the Academy from Ocean Beach. It travels about 3 miles to this holding tank before it's funneled into a complex filtration system, then into the exhibits. A lot of the most innovative green features in the new Academy focus on light and ventilation.
This is the part of the building you call the piazza.
Right.
It's beautiful, obviously, but it's more than that. It's functional.
It is. You know, one of the things we tried to do in this building is minimize our use of energy. And a big step in that direction is that we don't have any air conditioning on the public floor. Instead, we're using the wind and air around us in Golden Gate Park. So this piazza is open air, and as cool air drains down the slopes of the hills, it drops into this space, and then there are windows all the way around the perimeter that will open and funnel that fresh air out onto the exhibit floors.
The piazza has motorized shades to control the amount of sunlight coming in. There are automatic skylights on the roof that open and close to let hot air out of the building. The outer edge of the roof is surrounded by a glass canopy. It creates shade below, but even more importantly, the canopy was built with solar energy cells inside it. Giant cranes delicately hauled them to the roof, then lowered them into place. Sandwiched inside the glass are 60,000 photovoltaic cells.
20% of the light that hits it turns into electricity that feeds the building itself.
90% of occupied parts of the Academy get natural daylight. At the back of the building, the hillside was dug away to let the sun in.
These 2 floors are basements below ground, right?
Yeah, we're actually descending into the basement right now, even though it doesn't feel like it, because these floors, even though they're in the basement, are getting natural sunlight.
As a result, the office space inside is bright, with automatic lights that only go on when necessary. Some windows are controlled by hand, some open and close automatically.
So the building is regulating its own temperature. It's sort of a living, breathing building.
With all of the green technology incorporated in this building, the Academy is hoping to get the highest level of environmental certification possible. When we come back, the Academy's new and improved planetarium and a big snake.
Not an easy job to move an 82-pound anaconda. After this.
Welcome back to Under the Living Roof. I'm Dan Ashley. The new Academy of Sciences building has twice as many species and 6 times as many animals on display as the old one. Some big, some small, and some a little startling.
At 12 feet long and 82 pounds, this anaconda gives visitors a lot to look at. She's one of the Academy's prized specimens.
Anacondas are constrictors, so what they like to do is hold on to things, and so they'll constrict and kind of give you a hug.
For the last several years, the anaconda has been living at the Academy's temporary building downtown. We were there as a team of biologists moved her out.
Got it.
The crew has to hang on tight so the snake can get a medical exam, but they have to be careful she doesn't hang on to them.
Here, you want me to hold this part of the body?
Yeah, get this coil.
The veterinarian checks out her eyes.
Yeah, they look good. Okay.
In just a few seconds, the exam is over, and the team has to get the anaconda into her traveling container. But she's wrapped herself around one biologist's arm.
Are you free now? Perfect. Good job.
The trip across town is quick, and it's a lot easier to get her out of her container. The anaconda's first instinct is to check out her new home by tasting the air with her tongue. The exhibit has taken months to create. It was put together at the Academy Studios in Novato. The base was made of cast fiberglass, with a lot of attention to the safety of the snake and her keepers.
There are footholds and things here so that if somebody starts to slip, they'll have places that they can grab onto and places that their feet can lodge into so that they can get out quickly. So the snake is very fast.
All the roots in the exhibit are actually made of nylon rope, colored with silicone.
It's built to be something that is going to be completely non-toxic for the animals in the exhibit.
Once the snake was in her exhibit, she explored it thoroughly. Her tank mate is an iguana who was just a little bit nervous at first, but finally ambled over to get a closer look.
There's always a concern whenever you have two predators in an exhibit that you could have issues.
In the wild, the iguana and anaconda would live in the same habitat. Biologists believe the snake will consider the iguana too small to be worth eating. The two had a short stare down, and finally, the iguana had second thoughts.
We'll be monitoring it over the next few days and few weeks just to see how they get along.
So far, the two aren't good friends, but hey, nobody's gotten eaten. If snakes aren't your thing, how about the stars? The Academy has created a brand new planetarium. You can see the dome here from the outside. On the inside, visitors will watch an enormous projection screen. The result, a breathtaking view of the heavens.
The whole idea of a planetarium is changing. The traditional idea of a planetarium, which was a wonderful experience to take a look at the night sky, has evolved a little bit to become a much different kind of environment.
Instead of just looking at the stars, the new planetarium will make you feel as if you're flying through space. This flight is over a series of canyons on Mars that stretch as far as from San Francisco to New York. The new planetarium seating is different too, more like a very steep movie theater with a dome. Video projectors will blend 6 digital images to make one giant image that covers the 75-foot diameter screen.
I like to think of the planetarium dome as the biggest computer monitor in the Academy, and that way we can plug whatever we want into it and create all kinds of experiences for people who come to visit the Academy.
Those images are being created by dozens of experts, using everything from movie industry special effects to advanced techniques developed by the makers of video games.
We're actually directly below the planetarium right now, and we're looking at all of the equipment that actually feeds imagery up into the planetarium.
Crews are installing fiber optic cables to get the fastest possible internet connection to scientists around the world.
One of the goals here is to use real science data in everything we present to audiences. So we don't want to just create artwork. Instead, we want to give people an experience that uses the same data that scientists use to do their research.
This program is based on data from NASA's Cassini spacecraft orbiting Saturn. And this image highlights the location of extrasolar planets. That means planets outside our solar system, orbiting other stars.
So all of that technology is kind of combined to create a unique opportunity today, where we have the video game technology that creates beautiful graphics, but we also have the scientific data that allows us to have a better understanding of where we are in the cosmos.
The planetarium, just like the rest of the Academy, has been designed for change. The idea is that this building and all the programs inside will keep evolving with new scientific discoveries, and the people who come here will leave caring about the future.
I think if the next generation is curious and convinces their parents to pay attention to what they've done to the planet so that we don't repeat the same mistakes, the future will be better for them and for their children. And that's the purpose of our museum.
Whether you want a trip to the stars or to get eye to eye with a giant snake, it all starts tomorrow, September 27th, when the brand new California Academy of Sciences building opens. And tomorrow, the first day, admission is free. As you've seen, this new building is truly spectacular. An engineering and environmental achievement, a scientific triumph, and just a whole lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed the last hour and that you will come see this amazing place for yourself. For all of us at ABC7, I'm Dan Ashley. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you here.
This was the opportunity of a lifetime for me to take part in a project like this, and I treasure every day of it.
When you dream a dream, like the Rainforest Bowler, which is a greenhouse inside a building in San Francisco that you're going to turn into a tropical rainforest. Some people say it's crazy, it'll never be done, it'll never work.
To actually be in this building at this point is extremely rewarding. To be able to have worked with a lot of these penguins, again, to have raised them and then to bring them over here in what I would consider to be a very successful, beautiful exhibit, it is very rewarding.
There's the incredible energy behind recreating an institution from the ground up. It's not something that natural history museums normally do. You don't normally tear down a museum and build it back up. And that is incredibly exciting.
And the best part is they pay me to play with fish. What a life.